For some reason, the Oscars have a difficulty accepting genre films as an art. Every year, the Academy will nominate a single sci-fi or horror film to their roster of Best Picture nominations, and every year they get snubbed. For some reason, the Academy can't take these kind of genre films seriously. Hell, this year the Academy considered a Best Popular Film category as a means to separate genre films from regular films. This year, Black Panther was chosen as the obligatory sci-fi film for the year. And while this does feel like it's the Academy meeting a quota for the year, Black Panther is still a unique film. Its spin on the superhero genre is something that we haven't quite seen before, and not to mention that it has a ton of deep and heavy themes involved with it. While most superhero films will stick to their common strengths, Black Panther seems to dive into some pretty intense themes of race, social responsibility, and primarily the importance of how we respond and push back against injustice. Our main antagonist, Killmonger, is a character who has been tormented by injustice, primarily those inflicted on the African American community, and all that anger has built up to the years where he is now wanting to seek revenge for all the wrong done upon him. Meanwhile, you have T'Challa, who is a character who is more stern and more reserved, and he believes that the only way to fight injustice is by not becoming the thing that you hate. The questions raised by this conflict amount to how do we deal with injustice and oppression? When does fighting become revenge and thusly turns our own revenge into injustice, making us the very people we were fighting against in the first place? Themes like these are extremely profound, which is why the film like Black Panther earned its spot in the Best Picture category in the first place. But it's not just the story alone. The look of this film is incredible. The imagery, the culture, the way the film is set up, the setting. Wakanda is probably one of the most extraordinary film locations we've seen in a long time. The combination of ancient African tradition and culture with futuristic themes comes up with a very creative and innovative way of looking at sci-fi. The world of Wakanda is so developed, you believe that this is a real place. You actually feel immersed in the culture. You believe that the culture is fully fleshed out. Unfortunately, there are flaws in this film. For one thing, the action sequences leave a lot to be desired. Aside from one fight involving a waterfall, I don't really remember a lot of these fight scenes. Not a lot of them stick out to me. And when you're thinking of an action film, those are the things you're kind of hoping for. The thing that saves this film is the characters and the culture and the entire overall feel of the film. But the one part that's the most important is the action sequences, and I have to say that they are pretty lacking in this film. Another thing that makes this film sort of problematic is that it is ultimately tethered to the greater MCU. Now, I'm not saying that I hate the MCU. I, in fact, love it. It's one of my favorite film franchises of all time right now. But when I look at this film and I think of Best Picture, I think of a film that stands on its own. When you think of other sci-fi films that were nominated that were sequels, you think of Mad Max, that stood on its own. The problem with Black Panther is there are story elements and characters, and there's entire concepts that were developed in other films that we can't see because we're not watching those films right now. And I feel like with a film like Black Panther, you want those things. You want this film to feel like it's a fully fleshed out film. Issues regarding T'Challa's father, issues regarding certain villains and certain side characters that were developed in a previous film. I don't want to feel like I have to watch that in order to get this. And I know that's a major nitpick, and it's kind of the big point of the MCU is that all these films fit together. But I'm speaking from simply terms of this as a standalone. Unfortunately, while it does do its best to have its own identity, it's those other parts of it that just tether it back to the MCU, and it loses its own identity in those elements. I think of films like Batman and Spider-Man, while aren't necessarily great by today's standards of the superhero film, they do have their own identity, and they do have their own personality, and you feel like you can watch those films without having to watch a billion other things beforehand. But, again, that's nitpicking in an otherwise excellent film. The truth is, Black Panther probably won't win Best Picture this year because of just the bias against it. But when you look at it so far, it is a phenomenal film. It has high emotional elements, it has good laughs, a lot of good cries, and a lot of good suspense. And when you combine that with beautiful music, imagery, and cinematography, this film is a definite contender for the Best Picture. Black Panther. I loved it, and I think you will too.